I see Caleb is here with us now. Caleb is a senior. He's in the honors program at Hood. He's a major in art and archaeology with a concentration in studio art and a minor in business administration. His presentation is entitled Futurist Manifesto, Break from the Past. And his abstract speaks about the 1920s shock of the modern art world with its aggressive nature toward the past and fervor for the future. He's going to reflect on some works and perhaps show us a demonstration as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Caleb.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and pop a video in the chat. It's just a YouTube link. It's only about 5 seconds. If everybody could go and watch that before I get started, it has to do with my presentation. So that would be awesome. I'll just wait until a few seconds until that is, people go ahead and watch that. And then I'll begin. So hopefully everybody was able to watch that video. I kind of designed it to not have any context on purpose, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, you all will be able to understand my meaning behind my madness. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Caleb, and my presentation is Futurist Manifesto, Break from the Past. So a little bit of an introduction. So taking 20th century art my junior year was one of the richest experiences I've had in my understanding of art. I came into the class in the year with a little understanding of modern art and a little understanding of how I could apply art concepts into my own practice. As a studio artist myself focusing in ceramics, I was worried about displaying my artwork in my senior show that is required for all studio art majors my senior year. I was intimidated by the fine art world, and I viewed myself as a ceramicist who made mugs and bowls that were functional. And by functional, I mean only meant for practical use or their intended use. I did not see how a fine painting and pottery both equated to be art, and I felt like a little bit of a fraud, to be honest. So I was hoping that the course would show me how I could apply modern art concepts to functional work, which I needed these skills for my show. The course gave me a very new perspective on modern art and my own artwork, and it was done so primarily through first understanding Marcel Duchamp and his radical innovations, and then understanding the futurist movement of the early 20th century. So I hope with this presentation to share with you my own frustration with modern art, my own artwork, and then how I better understood it through Duchamp and the futurist movement. And I hope by the end that maybe if you share a similar frustration with modern art, that you will come to a similar conclusion I did and be open to new perspectives. So one of the largest struggles that I had with understanding modern art coming into the class was how a painting like Rothko's Simple Color could compare to the greatness of Michelangelo's David. Now, Michelangelo's work to me was clearly great because of the skill required to make such a sculpture. My struggle was not in the fact that I didn't consider it to be art, but that I didn't understand why it actually was art. I did not understand and to some degree respect the brain power, thought, creativity, and imagination that made art great. And this quickly changed as I was exposed to Marcel Duchamp, and I realized that modern art requires a great respect to cognitively understand the creativity and artistic ability for those who create modern art. So Duchamp was truly the first stepping stone in my learning process. And Duchamp was a French-American artist who was born in 1887 and came to the United States in 1915. He lived through some of the most famous transitions in high art during the turn of the 20th century and was incredibly revolutionary to the modern art scene. Duchamp famously had no respect for the conventional standards and aesthetics in art at the time, which is what made his work so revolutionary. And a revolutionary piece of his that changed my own perspective was a modern art, is a piece called Fountain. And this was one of Duchamp's first and maybe his most famous sculpture that he called ready-mades, which were everyday ordinary objects that were manufactured. And the fact that these ready-mades were manufactured functional objects that were rendered non-functional by their positional display and presentation in a gallery makes the viewer question what makes an object art. And the piece Fountain itself was simply a factory-bought urinal that was placed upside down. There wasn't much to it. And Duchamp submitted the piece for an exhibition at a gallery under the fictitious name R. Mutt, which wasn't actually his real name, obviously. The gallery that Duchamp submitted Fountain to claimed that they would display anything that was submitted. However, the gallery actually declined Duchamp's submission. And according to the gallery board, a sanitary ware object could not be considered a work of art. And though Duchamp was denied presentation in the gallery, he achieved what he set out to do, which was to push the limits of what was considered art and question the standard American morals. And there was no better way to do this than to display an object that is typically considered unsanitary and repulsive. And though Duchamp never explicitly stated what he wanted to push by the boundaries of fine art in the way that he did, he likely did so as a way of expressing rejection he felt earlier in his life with a similar piece that he called Nude Descending a Staircase, which is Duchamp's interpretation of a nude descending a staircase. Now, the painting was rejected by European art in Paris before he moved to the United States at the time, as its geometrical interpretation and movement of a body walking down a staircase was completely alien to European art trends at the current time. Now, I could present entirely on the intricacies and fascination of Fountain, Duchamp, this painting in particular, and everything else. However, the main takeaway that I gathered from studying this piece in particular was that Duchamp was not necessarily allowing his object to be art, but was trying to question the meaning of art through the object, which in turn made it art. And this type of cerebral or cognitive exercise that Duchamp plays with the viewers of the piece is truly what made Fountain great. And my new comprehension of what Duchamp was getting at fascinated and puzzled me. And it was the first step I needed to better understand modern artwork. And the second step in unlocking and understanding this was through the Futurist movement of the early 20th century. And if the name alludes at all to what the Futurist movement is about, Futurism is the love and embrace of modern technology and the future that was in the early 1900s. And this movement was obsessed about the innovations that came in the early 1900s, such as automobile, plane, and industry. And common themes in the Futurist art movement were expressions of speed, the city complex, dynamism, movement, and sound. All of these things that became wildly more intense and interactive in day-to-day life in the early 20th century. And Futurism wasn't simply about future progress, because Futurism focused heavily on a rejection of the past that could be classified as bitter, intense, violent, or even downright crazy. And in class, we read the Futurist Manifesto, which was written by Italian Futurist founder Filippo Marinetti, which describes the basic principles for Futurism. Now, there were two main components within the movement, within the manifesto, that allowed me to understand my art and modern art more thoroughly. The first is a hatred of the past, and Futurists hated the past with a serious vengeance. And Marinetti describes in his manifesto that the great classical era of artwork and history in Italy actually rots Italy and infects it with gangrene, is what he says. And he believed that progress should come through the elimination of institutions like museums and universities that still focus on the beauties of the classical era. He believed that if Italy were to grow in art, poetry, music, or any other medium, that it would need to rid its past to move forward. And the second principle of Futurism that I connected with is the desire and love for progress. And Marinetti's desire for progress was a little bit extreme, so much so to the point that he enjoyed wrecking his vehicle because of the power he felt behind a new automobile, which was new for the early 20th century. And he was constantly in the active pursuit for more. Now, I didn't take these literally in that I hate Italy and that I would go crash a new Tesla, but I was able to apply the general principles to my artwork. And this is really where I felt like my own personal breakthrough happened. So as a functional potter, my goal is to make the best functional work that I can. A byproduct, unfortunately, of making functional work is that I can fall into a rut with making things that are good, but not innovative or new. And additionally, the meaning in my work can only go as far as the function to some extent. I can produce work that I enjoy and that is beautiful and functional, although this work becomes old after a short period of time. And once I learned the futurist idea of hating the past and moving forward, I was able to understand the progress and the desire for the future that is something that should be actively sought after. However, I did not know where I was supposed to go with my functional artwork once I made this breakthrough, as I felt it was still difficult to provide existential meaning in a simply made mug. In my head, a mug was a mug and it was meant to drink out of and nothing more. I was bound by the constraints of functional work. Whenever I learned about Marcel Duchamp and the cerebral power that he put into his art, in combination with the manifesto of the Futurists, These ideas clicked in my head simultaneously. I began to understand that I was not limited by functional work and that I could exercise more of the cerebral even if my art was functional. And I learned through Duchamp that my artwork is truly what I desire to express through it. Just as Duchamp was proving that art is really a matter of having the audience question what they're seeing and why they're seeing it, I could do the same thing with my own artwork. And this is what led me to smashing the vase in the video shown at the beginning. As part of a reflection for the class, I made a traditional amphora vase that I was going to smash, which was symbolic of Filippo Marinetti's hate for Italy and the desire for progress, being that an amphora is a very traditional Italian shape. Instead of smashing an amphora, however, I ended up smashing a vase that I actually loved. And this is because smashing something that was made to be broken does not have the same effect as smashing something that I actually enjoyed. Hanging onto a vase I liked prohibited me from moving forward in my own skills, style, ability, and creativity. And smashing a piece that I actually loved meant so much more to me, symbolically and literally, than smashing a piece that was destined to be obliterated since I made it. And I believe this is really what Marinetti was after. Although I do not have and haven't reached the state of understanding with Duchamp unless he was part of that journey. This is what makes the shattered pieces that are pictured here art. Even though the shards of the vase are non-functional, they symbolize the cognitive process that I went through to arrive at what is sitting in front of the audience now. And this same process and idea apply to everything that I make. And I had to understand how something as non-functional as an upside-down urinal could be art in order to understand how my functional work could also be art. And this is what I saw in the genius of Marcel Duchamp, Futurism, and what I learned in the reflection of the 20th century art course. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you guys want to go watch the video again, you can do that, but that's all that I have.
Thank you so much, Caleb. It was extremely interesting to listen to the transformation of utilitarian objects and your own personal transformation as an artist. That's wonderful. If anybody has questions for Caleb about his work, about his studies, or his presentation, you can type those into the Q&A, and we'll be happy to pass those along so that he can respond to those. What are your plans for graduation, after graduation, Caleb?
So I own my own business right now, so I am going to hopefully be able to continue to produce work and do that. I make ceramic commissions. So that is my goal. I'm going to go into the 5-year MBA program here so that I can get a little bit more of a business background into understanding things so that I continue to pursue that route. And then eventually I hope to get my MFA as well so that I can pursue the business side of things and the art side of things.